Hello everybody once again, and welcome to another edition of Inside Outer Limits. I'm here as usual with my co-host Philip Mantle. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm hunky-dory, Chris.
Hunky-dory, that was wasn't that a David Bowie single or a song?
That's a David Bowie album and a very good
right,
one.
That's right, yes. You're showing your age there though, mate. My mum told me all about that one.
I'll not start singing anything from it, you're alright.
Well, today we've actually got a young man who's ex-RAF and I think ex-BAE Systems, I think. Is that correct, Jason? Jason Gleaves.
Yep. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening to you.
Good evening.
And are you ex-British Aerospace then?
Yeah, I worked at Broughton on the Airbus, building the Airbus passenger aircraft, so not there anymore now. But I was there a good while.
Brilliant. So, how long have you been interested in the subject then, Jason, the subject of UFOs?
As long as I can remember, going back way into my childhood, really. And then, a bit like most people in this field, where you look at likes of Arthur C. Clarke and people like that, with all of his program, The Mysterious World, and then obviously UFO magazines and unexplained magazines.
Did you ever have any kind of close encounter experience yourself?
Yeah, I've had a couple over throughout my career, military career as well. But my first one was in about the 1970s, mid 1970s, in Liverpool. Quite near to Aintree Racecourse, where they have the famous Grand National.
Yeah.
And I was with my sister, and I was 7 at the time. Mm-hmm. We were playing upstairs at my nan's house, and we both saw a silver disc outside the window.
Oh, right.
Illuminated, and then it seemed to take off at high velocity, and then we just carried on playing like it never even happened.
That's very interesting. Was it a daylight disc or was it an evening or?
Yeah, in the daylight.
Yeah.
And I'd actually forgotten about it. It was only later getting into the ufology side when my sister said to me, "Do you remember when we saw that disc outside the window?" And I was like, no. And then it came back, and as we spoke about it and gone further into it, and so it was a bit amazing, really.
Yeah, so this was the clincher then, really, I suppose, that sparked that interest once you actually realised this had happened. Was that the clincher that brought you into the field?
No, I wouldn't have said that. I probably, like I said before, most people in ufology are interested in science fiction, so you're looking at like the Star Wars, Star Trek, anything space. I'd be there watching it or in the pictures, and then it sort of led on to the magazines, obviously, where, and Arthur C. Clarke, where his Mysterious World, like we said, because those sort of programs just got you hooked. They got you want more and more and more.
Yeah, absolutely, I can agree with that.
I mean, I can understand what Jason's saying there, Chris, because from my point of view, I was always interested in things paranormal, but I also had an interest in science fiction, books. We used to read the books, and what magazines we could get our hands on. I think the first sort of regular magazine that I read was the Unexplained series.
Yeah,
Partworks. I read that avidly. I couldn't, I put one copy down and then I waited for the next one. And as you said, documentaries on the TV were a rarity. So when they came along, like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, if you didn't watch it, you couldn't sort of, I'll go and watch it later because it'd gone.
Yeah. There's no TV recorders back in them days, was there, Phil?
Not at all, mate. Not at all. No. So I can understand where Jason's coming from. It sort of parallels myself in a lot of ways.
Yes, but I suppose it does myself as well, really, because as you say, if you didn't watch live TV when it was broadcast back in the 70s, think video recorders didn't really come out till the late 70s, well, in the UK anyway, so yeah, if you didn't watch it, you missed it, and you was left wondering, and because that was it, you only got to see it once, unless that particular series was quite popular, and then it was repeated maybe a number of months down the line. So, Jason, what was it that took you into the RAF?
Just basically, when I left school, I went on to be a draftsman at Shell Stanlow Oil Refinery, and I always wanted to be a carpenter and a draftsman, so I went into the drafting and didn't really like it, so then I just went into the Air Force, joined the Air Force as a carpenter.
Now that to me seems strange. What was they using carpenters for in the RAF?
The old thing is they used to build them out of wood.
Oh, right.
Go! It's the oldest trade in the Air Force, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But I was actually part of the last 8 carpenters ever to be trained by the Air Force.
Wow.
I was on the
wooden
course.
bullets.
Yeah, that wouldn't go.
That wouldn't go.
But yeah, and that was at RAF St Athan in South Wales at the base. There when I was trained, and then went into. Then they actually finished the carpentry trade in the Air Force, and it disbanded the trade and brought civilians in with the cost-cutting things they brought in.
Yeah.
So then I remustered to aircraft finisher. So.
Now, what is an aircraft finisher? That's puzzled me as well.
It's a painter and finisher.
Oh, right, okay. He puts the polish on at the end, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you spray them and
right.
strip them down and things like that. So
Are you married, Jason?
I am.
Well, you've no excuse if wife asks you to paint the bathroom, have you? You can't,
I'm no good with the paintbrush.
You can't put it off.
Give me a
used to paint aeroplanes.
Now, during your time in the RAF, Jason, you I know you was at RAF Valley in Coningsby, Marham, Brize Norton, Cosford and Sealand. Which was your favourite posting?
There's quite a few. Really, I had detachments as well in with those to Green and Common and places like that, which at the time was when they had a lot of the protesters at the fences, the women protesting, CND and things like that.
Now, this is when all the protesters thought that the bombs were at Green and Common, but in fact there wasn't. There's somewhere else called Woodbridge or Bentwaters, I believe, if that's correct.
Yeah, that's where it was sort of a decoy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and other places that are well and truly gone now,
Yeah.
The Air Force closed, or, a long time since.
So you was also involved with the Battle of Britain Memorial flight as well, I believe, with the Lancaster bomber, the Hurricane and Spitfire.
Yeah,
the special.
That was Coningsby, RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
Nice over there.
Did you get to sit in them then and have a look around them?
Yeah, all the time. And
I'm really, really jealous now. That's it. Interview over. No, but it's one of the. I've always had I'm 58 now, but back in the mid-1970s, it was my intention to actually join the RAF, and unfortunately I got type 1 diabetes, so that kind of shot me in the foot. I couldn't join, so so I'm really, really jealous now to know that you've been sat in a Spitfire. That is it a Mark 9 that they've got down there, if I remember correctly?
I can't remember the top of my head. They've got a couple, and they've also got a few of the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
And there's a Jet Provost, I think, there, and a Jetstream, sorry.
Yeah.
And the Lancaster, and then the Dakota came in later.
Yeah. No, the Dakota was the American DC, wasn't it? DC-9,
yeah.
I think, something like that. And that was the all-purpose we carry anything kind of thing, wasn't it, really? Yeah.
Brilliant,
Troops
brilliant
to everything, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And, of course, a lot of the back in the early days after the Second World War ended, a lot of them were used as airliners as well. So, when the first airliners companies were being formed as well, and I know a lot of them were involved in the Berlin food lift as well back in the late 1940s there, when the Russians blockaded Berlin. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, what about the in your book, your UFO photo book? I know. How long has this been published now, guys? Can you give me some kind of reminder?
Well, yeah, I mean, we published it not that long ago, earlier this year, Chris. For those who are listening and not aware, I have a small one-man publishing outfit called Flying Disc Press, and Jason will tell you how he got into this in a minute. But Jason's first book is simply called, its main title is UFO Photos, and that's all it deals with. Jason, as part of his research, computer analyzes UFO photographs. And it's an area of study that's always interested me. But as far as I could tell, there was never a book about just deals with UFO photographs. So that's what Jason's book is. It's photographs taken from around the world, down the decade. Some you'll be aware of, most probably not. And Jason has computer analysed them and given his feedback. But at the beginning of the book, Jason will tell you how he does this. He goes through the process of how he does it, give you some of the most obvious objects that turn up on pictures. I think birds is probably one of the most obvious today, Jason.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd love to say it's a bestseller, but it is a fascinating book that you can have at hand. And it's open to everyone. No matter how much you're involved in the subject, you can look at this book, because if you are a UFO researcher, there will come a time, no doubt, when you are presented with a piece of film or a photograph, and somebody will say, "I took this. What do you think it is?" And you'll sit there and scratch your head and think, it might be this, it might be that. Well, Jason's your man to have a look at it. So tell us a bit more how you tended to get into the sort of photographic analysis side of things, Jason.
Sure.
Was this after you left the RAF?
Yeah, it was way after, and it started way after I actually started the web pages, the Facebook pages and things like that, UFO only. Really, I wanted to find out answers myself, really being curious, and like we explained before, going way back into the childhood, things that happened to me. My father had Man in Black incident where a figure came into his house and things like that. So really I wanted answers. It's a bit like the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the film, Steven Spielberg film, where Richard Dreyfuss, the character in the film, and he gets the syndrome where he needs to find out answers and things like that. I wouldn't say I was as bad as that, but I wanted to know. I certainly wanted to know. So I started the page, and I was writing on other pages. I think I contribute probably a couple of hundred different pages on Facebook. And people from all around the world started giving me images to analyse and footage, plus things I've been looking at myself. It sort of stemmed from there, where I get into it in that respect of looking into it because I was interested myself. People contacted me with experiences they'd had, encounters, etc., and going down that line. Yeah, so I get photographs. That when I get a photograph off somebody, the first thing I really try to ask for is the original photograph.
Well, let's just stay there. Let's say you and I don't know each other. Mm-hmm. Right, Jason, here is a photograph. I took it on this date, this location. just run us through the process, that you'd start with, and how you'd end up with a conclusion, if you could, please.
Yeah, well, I tried to look a little bit into the person contacting me for obvious reasons, because you don't know that person. You'd like to, a little bit of a background to them, what profession maybe. Not too personal, but enough just to carry the interview on as such. Obviously, they've contacted me with some sort of image or footage that they don't know what they've seen. Then I would ask them for the original, after obviously viewing the image they'd sent me, whatever format that came in. I would ask for the original, because when I analyse photographs, that's the best image you're going to have to work with. And sometimes when images have been posted on, as an example, to somebody else, and it's gone in another direction through an email, you're getting third, fourth, fifth generation photographs, and each time the actual detail and the pixelation in the photographs will degrade. So that's why it's so important to get the original source footage, because that's the best you're going to get.
I was just going to ask you, Jason. I was just going to mention what you said there. Really, it's the same when you're doing. In the old days, we used to have cassettes, and you used to copy from one cassette to another cassette, music cassettes.
Yeah, exactly.
But the quality of that would deteriorate as you did a swap to this reel, then to that reel, etc., etc. So exactly the same with digital photography. Then that's very interesting.
Yeah. So what are the processes you would go through? Right, you've got the original photograph. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, well, I've got this source photograph, like we said. I would obviously try to upscale that photograph. So using software I have, I'll upgrade it to 1080 HD or something like that, where it obviously keeps the same pixels within that photograph, but it enlarges it, because if you've got the original photograph and you just zoom in without upscaling first, all you're doing is zooming into, if for example, as you've zoomed in closer, you'll just see a lot of pixelation, the squares in the photograph itself. Not so much on older pre-digital photographs, because 35mm is slightly different in that respect, but with the digital photographs especially, and after obviously upscaling what I can, that's the best you can work with, and then you really, that's where you go deeper. Then you enlarge it from there, you enhance it from there, again using software. And if this software is there for anyone to use, it's not magic. It's not, anybody can do this. And, I say to people, get out there and do it yourself, research and get in and look at photographs. And often enough, when you've done this process, you've gone through this set out process that I would do. That's when you would start to see whether the pictures are birds, like we said before, which are a big misidentification of craft, because obviously when a bird flies, the wings are back, it's in a sleek, silhouette that gives it the impression of a disc side on, often dark as well, so a detail, it's moving quite fast for the eye. And obviously, you look into where the person is living or where the photograph was taken. And again, you're looking for military, civilian, airports, anything else that could, that the actual object could be at that time.
You're looking for little hints and tips as a possibility. I mean, like you said, when you speak to an individual, it's as important to speak to them and get all the details, and the photograph is just part of the whole episode.
Yeah.
And I would hazard a guess, Jason, that the same with UFO reports that don't have photographs, that most of what you get can probably have a rational explanation at the end of the day.
Yeah, most. Again, you've probably seen it more than most, being around a lot longer in the field, Philip. But
yeah, thank you for that.
I'd love to just have that. But it hasn't changed really over the time. It's the only thing that's really changed is the cameras have got better. More people are accessible to cameras because they're on phones, which everybody has.
Well, that's interesting because, that at the Out Limits conference last year,
Mm-hmm.
a gentleman there called Russ Callahan.
Yeah.
And Russ used to work for UFO magazine. He was the son-in-law of the late Graham Birdsall. And Russell's done a lot of work with photography and photographs of alleged UFOs. And Russell is of the opinion that the better the cameras have got and the greater their availability, the worse the results have. Because we still go back to photographs like McMinnville in the 1950s, taken by Paul Trent and so on. And he's rather, I wouldn't say skeptical, but rather a bit nonplussed as to why we've got better cameras and more of them today, yet the results of alleged UFO photographs still turn out to be pretty poor. Would you agree with Russell or not?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I agree that the cameras, they are vastly better. I mean, the camera on my new phone is 4K, which is huge, and the actual detail. It just means when you actually want to, for instance, if I want to analyze a photograph taken with that camera, it's going to come out in more detail and per frame and things like that. When the older cameras or the webcams that catch a lot of things, they're taking so many frames per second, so you'll only get the object in frame for maybe two frames out of about 10, 12, more than that. With it reducing, I wouldn't say they're reducing because of the amount of images I still receive from people around the world. So, especially from ESETI at the ranch at Mount Adams, with James Gilliland and everything up there.
I met James many years ago.
Yeah. I'm getting images constantly from there, so I'd have to disagree on that fact, just more the fact of that I am receiving a lot of photographs. But
what about the argument then, Jason? Let me play devil's advocate for a while here.
Mm-hmm.
That today, we've all got, not all of us, but most people have got, some kind of home computer, be it a laptop or a tablet or a desktop, and as you've said, you can download or purchase a whole range of software. There are those that will say that because of this, you can manufacture fake photographs using this software that cannot be proven to be a hoax. Would you agree with that or not?
Yeah, I would. For the fact, the apps you can get on iPhones, for example, now, where you can insert a UFO in a photograph.
That's right, I've seen that, yes.
I've seen them too, yeah.
And you look at it and you think, wow, that's really good. But
so is that where now it's even more important to look at the person and the background on where it was allegedly taken, at what time, and so on? Yeah. Does that information become more critical than the actual photograph itself?
Yeah, definitely. The bigger case really comes into play there, because you'd really need to know if someone's trying to make money out of it or.
I mean, I've had endless arguments with people who put photographs up that are birds, and no matter what you say to them, they'll argue until they're blue in the face. But I say, well, you're at the seaside.
Yeah.
I want to tell you one story. This is please excuse me, but in pre-digital ages, I used to be Bufora's director of investigations, and I got a still photograph sent from a gentleman who don't live too far away from where I did, and it was what he'd done. It was a still from a video film. So what he'd done, he'd frozen the video on the TV and taken a photograph of it, and he says this is an alien. And it's taken at such and such a location. It's daylight, and sure enough, there's a creature. You can see the whole lot. It wasn't that bad, and I found, I knew the location, but he perhaps took the photograph too good, because you could actually see that it was a man wearing a mask, and you could even see the elastic band going round the side of his head, pulling his hair in. And he'd like these things stuck on the end of his fingers. He looked a bit like Nosferatu from the old movie. So I thought, what do I do with this? I got his address. I tried directory inquiries. There was no telephone number listed. It's before the days of email. I thought about actually driving over and knocking on his door, but I thought, no, you never know what he might be like. So remember this, I was part of Bufora then, so I had Bufora headed notepaper. And I wrote this lovely letter to him saying, dear Mr. Whatever, this is fantastic. This is the evidence we've all been waiting for. I'm going to alert NASA, the CIA, the Ministry of Defense, everybody, And I said, I've got to see this video, because he claimed he'd shot a video of it, and this was just a still. So I posted the letter, recorded delivery, and lo and behold, later that week, he wrote back. He says, dear Mr. Matlock, I'm sorry, but my son taped over it.
Now, of course, when you look at a picture of a TV screen, which of course is a light source as well, if you'd have blown it in far enough though, Phil, what you could have seen is a TV screen is made up of lines which go across, or they used to be in the old days. I don't know so much nowadays, but they're made up of lines. I remember looking at the old TV back in the 1960s when it was made up of 425 lines, and you could actually see the lines on your screen. Then, of course, they moved that up to 625 lines, which made it a little bit more difficult to see. But, I mean, back in the days when you was doing that with Bufora, I would imagine it wouldn't have been an LED or anything like that kind of
Not
TV.
at all, mate. It was a colour telly. That's all I could tell you. But it goes into the thing that Jason was saying. It was about the gentleman.
Yeah.
No telephone
Absolutely.
number.
Absolutely.
I knew there was a location where that he mentioned was a real place. I couldn't tell if it had been taken there. It's just some woodland, not far from where we live. And I thought, how do you play this? What do I do? I'm not going to waste time having it analysed. I can see it's a fake, But
yeah.
It was just, but what I'm saying is the background story was more important than the actual photograph. Yeah. And we didn't have access to computers. I mean, they didn't exist as far as home computers were concerned. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think a ZX Spectrum 48, whatever they called him at the time, mate, would have been able to do something like that.
So what I would say, Jason, I mean, out of all the photographs you've looked at, or pieces of video film, is there any one or any group of photographs or film that really stand out to you as being, a shining example of what is the real thing? It's not a fake.
Yeah.
Can you think of something?
There's quite a few. Actually, in the new book, there's some in there that I've really need. I didn't put them in originally, and I've added them later because I really did think.
Can I just interrupt there? Just going to let people know that Jason will have a new book out with Flying Disc Press next year. So that's what he's referring to.
Oh, sorry.
So, it's all right, mate. No, I'm looking. Right. You keep going, Jason. Don't worry about that, mate.
But there's actually a case in there where it's really it led on really from where I get photographs of people that are misidentifying maybe UFOs of the disc-shaped clouds, the lenticular clouds, that type of thing. But this case was actually taken by military personnel I haven't got the actual dates on me at the minute, but and it's of a ring. It was a ring-shaped object that was appeared over an army base in the US. It might have been the 1950s, and the guy in question took about 6 photographs, and this disc-shaped object came over the base, got larger and larger, and I've analysed it and overlaid photographs and put them all in sequence so you can see. And it actually morphs into a cloud. And when you look at it, you can see each frame as it's coming along. The 6 separate photographs, I've actually matched them all up and overlaid. And it's a perfect round circular shaped cloud. And that goes back really to people who are contacting me worldwide who are seeing craft that are within clouds or manifest themselves within a cloud or producing clouds and mists around them. So it goes back really as well towards the camouflage and things like that, that they can blend themselves into the surroundings.
Well, even in Close Encounters, when the mothership appears at the, behind Devil's Tower, what you get first is clouds, don't you?
Yeah. But this was a black and white, so it's pre-digital. It's before, so it's the old, whether it's 35mm. I think it was taken. I've actually got a photograph of the old style Browning camera it was taken on. And if you actually go into it, you can see the first as it's a distinct ring-shaped object, and it's getting bigger as it gets over the base. There's trees, buildings, so they're great for perspective. And also, as it gets closer, you can see it visibly change into this cloud, and it's amazing to see. And I didn't actually include that first, but I felt it had to, really, because with the book being about close encounters and the different categories 1 to 7, I thought it was a good one to be in there.
Absolutely.
You can tell the times are changing, because when I first began in ufology, there were only 3 close encounters. Now there's 7. I mean,
yeah. Well, it was 1 and 2, and then it was 3 when it came out for Steven Spielberg when he brought the movie.
There was only 3 in Old Money, I can assure you.
Yeah. And Dr. Hynek, who had a cameo role in the film, didn't he?
He did, yes.
They actually brought the 3rd out, and he didn't want to bring the 3rd kind out, C3. So, it was interesting.
Absolutely. So, because we're talking about photographic evidence here, I quite recently, well, in fact, I sent both of you an image that my wife had taken while she was standing in the back garden of our property. And the reason she took the photograph, she was actually talking on WhatsApp to one of her female friends who was on holiday in Benidorm, which is of course in Spain. And a friend was saying how nice the weather was, and the sky is lovely, it's nice and warm, etc., etc. So my wife went outside and took a photograph of, you can just see the top of the trees with the sun behind. The sun's just coming up above the houses opposite. This was roughly 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and we've got a few wisps of cloud. And on one of the photographs, and my wife says to me she didn't actually see this object when she took the photograph, was a white dot at the top of one of the clouds. Now, I actually sent this to you quite recently, didn't I, Jason, for you to have a look at?
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
I did send it to Phil as well, to be quite honest.
You did, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Do you want to tell us what you think of it then, Jason?
Yeah, I went through the same process like I did with all other photographs that I did or have done, and I didn't think it was a lens flare of such. Just with the trees being at the angle with the sun, lower down.
Yeah.
it wasn't a typical lens flare that I would be looking for, put it that way.
Yeah.
And when I enhanced into because it was virtually a dot on the original photograph.
It didn't take up many pixels, did it, on the actual photograph?
It didn't, no, but when I actually enhanced the photograph enlargement and going through that side of it, it had 3 separate illuminated sections to it, which an aircraft would have maybe 1 or 2, but definitely a central fuselage would be illuminated. You would see that. And that sort of a distance for an aircraft, you probably lose the wings. You lose the sight of the wings. It was unexplained. It was an object. Again, how long it was there and where it was travelling, because you did send me another photograph.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I think the second photograph, which you overlaid on top of the original, it's actually got an aircraft trail. The cloud formation, the condensation trail, whatever it is that comes back from the aircraft engines. You can actually see that, and that is just positioned above the tree. While the other thing is a couple of more degrees further up the image. Now they were taken, my wife tells me, with about a 20-minute interval in between them. Yeah.
Well, I did that. I actually overlaid the photographs really to find the direction of the vapor trail, because with other aircraft, unknowing to the altitude of both objects, but obviously the aircraft, to have a vapor trail, is going to be over 20,000 feet at least. So, you wouldn't get a vapor trail lower than that.
Yeah, that's correct, because the air's a lot thinner up there and it comes off a lot easier. That's right,
So I was trying to eliminate in that respect, but then also the direction of the vapor trail, because you could see if any other aircraft in the area, they would also be coming, if they're on the same flight path, they would all be going in roughly the same direction. So
absolutely. Now what I have done is I've actually used your images, Jason, and I've put a little article into the next issue of Outer Limits magazine about what you've analysed there, and just a few brief details just to give people a bit more information about it.
Yeah, great.
So, well, thank you very much, for looking at that. Now, RAF Cosford, the Cosford incident there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Jason?
Yeah, that was an incident that happened in March 1993.
That's right.
RAF Cosford it's a training camp in the Midlands, not far from Telford and Wolverhampton, sort of in between. I think Old Brighton is the nearest village to it. And Cosford is, like I said, it's a training camp. It's also the Air Force Museum. So there's every aircraft you can think of in there. Quite a large runway as well. And during March 93, it was a good friend of mine who was the orderly corporal in the guard room. I was on the base that night but didn't see the object, and he told me via quite a lengthy drawn out trying to get the information, because the people didn't really speak about things like that then. It was more of a hush. But what actually happened, he was in the guard room as the orderly corporal. Next to him you've got the off-duty guard personnel and guard commander in the guard room itself, and the RAF police and everybody to do with security of the base would be there. And there was a young airman who was on the guard post of the airfield, and I don't know if anybody else has ever been to RAF Cosford. As you pass under the railway bridge going towards the museum and take a sharp right in the road, there's an actual guard hut with a airfield gate right across, which is locked. and it's access to get to the airfield, obviously. And this young lad was on there early hours, and in the guard room itself, everything was nice and quiet the way you want it to be when you're doing a night shift on guard. And all of a sudden, the radio jumped into life, and it was this young airman screaming down the radio to get the guard commander out to the airfield because something was over the airfield. And where he was actually located, situated, he's probably a couple of 100 feet from the airfield itself. So at night time, the airfield was pitch black. Have you ever been to anywhere, a big open space? It's just, you can't see anything, can you?
I have been up onto the top of the Yorkshire Moors, and we did a sky watch up there many years ago. In fact, it was the night that Princess Diana died, so that tells you how long ago that was. That was 1997, and I do know it is extremely dark, but you do get, we had a fantastic night that night, to be quite honest with you, with the star field that you could see practically every single star up there. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that would be really good. But the airman was screaming down the radio anyway to get the guard commander out because something was over the airfield. So upon this, the guard commander, everybody else got into the Land Rovers and Sherpa vans and everything they had at the time, got in there and went out to the airfield. Upon arriving on the airfield itself at the gate, they all witnessed this large black triangle-shaped craft, which is jet black, a couple of lights on the corners apparently, and it was just making a humming sound, not actually touching the ground, but I think they said it was hovering over the ground low down. And they said it was the size of a battleship. It was huge, this thing, so enormous in size. Upon seeing it after, I don't know the actual time limit they saw it, it took off and went up onto another RAF base, which is RAF Shawbury, which is probably 15-20 miles away as the crow flies. That's a helicopter base. I think Prince Harry and all that learned that he was taught how to fly there and everything.
Yeah.
And through have you heard of Win Keach?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, Win. And he's an ex-RAF pilot himself. But his friend, who was in the air traffic control tower that night, apparently saw this craft come in over the airfield, and it was actually firing lasers down towards the ground.
Yes,
well,
he said it was looking for something.
As if it was looking for something. That was the impression he got. But that night, whether it was after, but definitely before, throughout the UK, there was a lot of sightings of triangular-shaped craft, whether it was the same craft or not, and it was seen by on-duty policemen and members of the public.
Now, you say there were sightings around many parts of the UK. Indeed, there were, but my information is also that these were seen in parts of Ireland, northern France, and other parts of Europe as well, you know.
Yeah.
And this is one of the, I think it's still one of the cases that Nick Pope says is most convincing UFO reports, if I remember that correctly. What is your interest in it then, Jason?
Well, really, it was to do with the UFOs, and it was something that happened, and it was all hushed and quieting down.
Right. Okay. So, I'm sorry. I thought you actually had other a little bit more information regarding maybe an image or something like that. That's why I thought I'd bring this one up. My apologies.
No, but yeah, again, like we said, Nick Pope actually was involved the day after in it, and through Whitehall and the MOD. Yeah. And I remember my friend saying that people turned up in suits and were asking questions and interviews, etc. And it was certainly made people aware and like Nick says himself in talks, and he actually wrote a piece in the book for me as well.
Yeah.
Just really backing up what happened before and the aftermath.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, for those that are not aware, Nick was employed at the Ministry of Defence at the time, was he not? And he tried to get the MOD to officially investigate this. I mean, he wrote a report about it, but there's also the skeptics out there. Am I right, Jason? I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Because on the same night they claimed that there was a Russian rocket or satellite,
launch.
or something of that nature. Was it Cosmos 2238 or something like that?
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest, I know from my past experience, we, again, had a re-entry. I can't remember the date. It was in the 80s sometime over England. It was a satellite that was coming down. And we knew it was coming, but we still had a tremendous amount of reports from the general public describing this re-entry, that it made a noise, it had windows in it, that they could smell it, and a whole host of things, but none of them described it as a satellite re-entry. We even had drawings. It looked like it was a bus that was coming in.
Yeah.
And not only that, it was seen over one of the sort of rules of thumb. You could tell what it was. It was seen over a wide distance, because this was coming in at a high altitude, and it burnt up in the atmosphere or whatever. And I know people like David Clark has put forward that this is the explanation for this particular spate of sightings. I mean, I think he wouldn't agree with David or anyone else's conclusion that you were looking at some kind of rocket that night.
No. Again, a lot of people do see craft, but I do also think probably 90% of people that see, for instance, a triangular-shaped craft, it's probably some kind of secret, deep, black covert project or something that we don't know about, which are slowly coming out now, more to do with the Trump space fleet and all regards to the Stars Academy and things like that. But people, I think most of the time, they do see something that is unexplainable, and it is unexplainable even after research and looking into it. But
I mean, I think what's interesting, I mean, again, we used to call these things the Silent Vulcan, as a nickname after the old Vulcan bomber. Not because it was a Vulcan bomber, just because it was triangular in shape.
Yeah.
And what is interesting, and I rewatched again this the other day, is we tend to look at a spate of sightings on its own, and we don't try it. It's rare we try and put it into any kind of context. Now, if you look at flying triangles, we'll just use that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
There was a spate of them in Westchester County in upstate New York. And I think it was one of the last field investigations that the late Dr. Hynek did with a gentleman called Philip, I can't pronounce it, Imbrigono. And he wrote a book on it called Night Siege. And it was just the time when the sort of first home video cameras were becoming available. And so there are some bits of film of it as well. And lo and behold, no sooner did that, and I'm talking a lot of sightings, that had finished. And then here in the UK, from the sort of mid-1980s to the late 1980s, we had a spate of triangular sightings over sort of what we call the Midlands, South Yorkshire and into West Yorkshire, some of which were witnessed by police in South Yorkshire. David Clark did investigate them. And lo and behold, when they dissipated, we had the triangular sightings in Belgium, which of course culminated with the Belgian Air Force tracking one of these things on a jet on its radar. But although the main bulk of sightings were sort of late 1980s, they did carry on for quite some time before they dissipated into the 1990s. And I was just wondering if this thing at RAF Cosford might have been the back end of whatever these triangular sightings were. And so you take it on its own and it's interesting, but when you try and link it all together, I think there's something there, and it's not just happened overnight. It's something that's been going on for a number of years over a wide range from one side of the Atlantic to the other. That's my three penneth on it for what it's worth.
You can look at that as well, because you can go with cycles where people see different shaped UFOs through different decades, and like you've just said, through the 80s, 90s was the delta shaped, the triangular shaped TR-3B type of craft, and other periods you'll just see disc shaped, and more modern now you're seeing a lot of orbs.
There you go. Why is that then? Why do we not get any more flying saucers?
Well, I'm still getting them, photographs of them.
Well, I've published a couple of books about classic close encounters, with strange creatures, the whole works. Where have they all gone?
Yeah.
Because I've not had one across my desk, or I've read about one, in another part of the world for a long time, and why is that? So again, if you look at ufology in total, from when we'll take from Kenneth Arnold onwards, you can see how it's changed, and you could even say evolved in inverted commas down the decades to where we are now. Now, is that the phenomena evolving, or is something else at play?
Yeah, it is changing. Definitely changing.
I'm just thinking, I think it's a phenomena that's changing, to be quite honest with you. Let's take an example really of an everyday car. The cars that we had in the 1940s, 1950s were not the same shape and speed, etc., etc. Didn't have the same make of engines made out of iron or whatever. Nowadays they're all made of alloys and they're all a lot lighter. So I think it's a phenomena which is representing this, which is changing itself. But just going back to that Cosford incident and the rocket explanation, I think it's a Cyclone rocket. It was the name of it, TSYKLON, a Cyclone rocket, which apparently this Russian rocket re-entered the atmosphere at about 2:20 a.m. But there's an error in the margin of an hour of either way. Now, if we take 1:15 as being the local time, that some say that explains the UFO sighting at Cosford. But it's also quite interesting that Nick Pope wrote to DI-55 with the comment himself, whilst the decay might explain some of the high altitude sightings, it does not explain the low level sighting of this vehicle, round about 200 foot up, and also fails to explain the report of a low hum, which was reported I'm not saying this is an explanation for it, but I think this is where Nick's naivety and his lack of experience come in, because as I explained with the previous Russian satellite or whatever it was that re-entered that we knew about, people were explaining the same kind of things, Chris. Mm-hmm. They said they could see windows in it. Well, there was no windows in it. And they said they could smell it. Well, you couldn't. There was no smell. And they could hear it. Well, there was no noise. These are things that we for whatever, we put onto these type of things when we see them. And even now, although it looks very different, I think just in the last couple of weeks, I think it was what's-his-face, Elon Musk launched a rocket. Yeah.
And, of course, people fantastic when you saw it going up. Wonderful. But the people saying, what's this? Look at this, look at that. And you say, well, I'm sorry, it's a rocket launch. Well, what are you talking about? You're a nutcase. You know.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's a rocket. So we impart our own thoughts when we see these things at times. So I think I'm not saying that's the explanation for this. I'm just saying Nicky's wrong when it says it can't. They can't be explained. Some of the low altitude site. I'll give you another example, and it comes to your neck of the woods. This, Chris, in the late 1980s, over Hull, there was at night a spate of sightings. Again, it was this huge triangular craft all lit up, and I was actually on BBC Radio Humberside live when the reports of these things were coming in. And RAF Binbrook was still going there. It's closed now, I believe.
Oh, yeah, it has, yeah.
Yeah, so they'd phoned Binbrook, and Binbrook said, no to do with us. And that was a play on words. And now, as I'm live on air, I got one caller come in, and I spoke to him privately, and he was ex-RAF. And he said, Philip, I know what this is. It's a refueling exercise.
Yes.
He says you have two tanker aircraft that go out over the North Sea, and you have the jets following them, like a flock of geese almost. And they do it over the sea for obvious reasons, in case of any accidents. Of course, they've all got lights on. Now, one gentleman, I went to interview these people later, Chris, in and around Humberside. He said it landed in his field. Well, I think there was about 14 or 16 aircraft involved. Yeah. And it didn't come from Binbrook. So when they said it's nothing to do with us, they didn't mean us, the RAF, they meant us as Binbrook. It came from somewhere down south, and it flew up the coast and out over Humberside. But some people did report it being at very, very low level, which of course it wasn't. No. So, I have that in my files to remind me that we can't always believe what people tell us.
Yeah, I think this is the thing that flew straight over the Humber, didn't it, over the Humber Bridge, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. And this chap was adamant. He was a farmer. He said it landed in my field. I'm thinking, no, it didn't. And it didn't. But that's just the way it is. Fascinating.
Black triangle-shaped craft. They've been witnessed since 1896. Going way back, and that's before the Wright brothers and everything else. Where people were around in balloons and things then. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think with sightings and encounters, they kind of go around in fashion. Not long before he died, I met the late Dr. John Mack, and one of the things that John talked to me about, we had lunch together at a conference in the States, and he wanted to go back in time and look at some of the old contactee sightings, like George Adamski and various others. It was just something that puzzled him. He was just fascinated by it, because one of the things he said is we don't get that now. Those things have, for whatever reason, have gone. Yeah. It's moved on. And so he says it's like anything. We need to understand our history. And he was intent on having a look back at things like that. Obviously, sadly, he never got the chance, because he died in a road traffic accident.
Yeah, that was in London, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, yeah. So what I was going to say, Jason, if there's anybody listening out there tonight, and there'll be thousands, mate, I can assure you that the airwaves will be blocked listening to this show tonight. But if they have a photograph or photographs, either digital or the old 35mm or a piece of film, and they wish to get in touch with you and have you personally check it out, how would they go about that?
Anyone who has photographs, images, or something they're really curious about, they can contact me through the website UF Only, on Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, and other media. And I'll look at every photograph, so I don't judge anybody. I can get it wrong too, like anybody else can, but I will certainly look at something for them. I'll analyze it. I'll go through the process of looking at it for them. Also, if I don't know or have the answer for them regarding their image. I certainly know somebody who will, or could give them a better idea, and I'll put them in their direction. I just love getting photographs and trying to do the Sherlock Holmes on it and trying to find out. It's the buzz of doing it, and that's probably why we do it, isn't it?
Is there any photograph or piece of film that you've looked at, Jason, that springs up as a deliberate hoax and someone's just tried to catch you out? Can you think of any?
There was a guy who contacted me from in the States. I can't remember where exactly or his name. And I don't mean that, I just can't remember really. And I went through the exact process like everybody else when they send me an image. And when I do it, it's not always as quick to do because I do have other things like a job to do and family life. But when I go...
They do get in the way, don't they, Jason? They do get in the way.
Yeah. And when I looked at it, it was a triangle-shaped craft, but more of a V shape, like the Phoenix Lights, that sort of a shaped object. And the more I looked, I thought, ooh. And he took the photograph out of his car window. You could see the window half down, so it wasn't a reflection through glass. And he was moving, and he took it a couple of photographs. So I got the best photograph that I could see out of them. Did the usual thing, overlaid and built up the image. It was a B-2 bomber, which, again, when it comes back to, I should have gone deeper into his background, and he was passing nearby an Air Force base, another little alarm bell. But when I actually went in and analysed the photograph, enhanced and blew up that image, you could actually see the jagged edges of the back of the bomber, which are, they do stand out quite obvious when you see a photograph. But then I actually got a photograph of a real bomber, B-2 or whatever it was, put that on, and it was virtually identical.
So do you think the gentleman knew that, or?
I think he sort of knew it because, he said there was no sound at the time, but the distance, etc. I know, being ex-military, that you can be a distance from military aircraft and not hear them due to wind, anything, any environmental condition could cause that, sound. But passing the Air Force base close by, and where he must have known the area and also seen others, I was a bit dubious after going through all the process of doing it and it being what I sort of thought it was. So yeah, think that's the sort of thing I'll get, but then I still get the buzz out of doing that because you're getting to the end result, aren't you? You get your little fix sort of thing.
Yeah, you're getting your answer. That's what. It's like I said when we interviewed Philip Kinsella a couple of weeks ago. Now, we're all seekers of truth, and it's getting that truth from that image is what you're seeking.
Yeah.
Well, it's like some people have constantly asked me about my involvement with the infamous alien autopsy film, which of course. It turned out to be a fake, and I said, does that disappoint you, Philip? I said, no, because I followed it. It took me a long time, but I followed it, and eventually, many years later, I got to the bottom of it, and I was quite happy that I'd found the answers, and it wasn't one of the skeptics who just dismissed it as a hoax, but couldn't prove it, Philip Glass being one of them, and others. But I said, no, it was me, a UFO researcher that got to the bottom of it. No one else. And I got a huge buzz out of that because I've been accused of being involved with it. I was Ray Santilli's accomplice, and God knows what else, So I understand that. But surely as well, Jason, you must get some people that have submitted some photographs. You found a rational explanation for them, and they're not happy.
Oh, yeah. to be honest, I don't like being the bearer of bad news, because when they've brought a photograph to you, whether it's truthful or not, I'll never judge anybody, because that's not my job to. But I will always try and help them. But again, it's whether you're being duped on a photograph. Some people will contact me and they don't want no publicity at all. They don't want it reposting or anything like that. They just want the answer to what they've seen. And if it turns out to be something man-made or an aircraft bird or something that's explainable, then so be it, and off they go on their merry way. But you'll get other people, like you've just said, that will be a bit anti about it, and I don't believe what you're saying. And I said, well, it's just my opinion. I've done what I can for you, you know, and that's all you can do.
Absolutely. So, in your first book, then, Jason, UFO Photo, you mentioned that you've got two favourite UFO photographs from the book. Now, the first one that you mentioned is the civilian Argentine pilots who had a double buzz. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and just let our listeners know what it's all about?
Yeah, it's in the book, and really it's more, if you could see the footage is on YouTube, and I've analysed the footage really there. That is really the best, one of the best that I've done, in my opinion. But in the book, it really needed to go in the book, but it was at frames, because obviously you can't put video in a book. So
not yet. I think they're working on it, but not yet.
They can in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Well, it looked like it could have been in Harry Potter, but and it was footage that this civilian airline pilot in Argentina, and he was flying I think it was a twin prop thing, a turboprop aircraft, and he'd seen UFOs before, but obviously at the time he didn't have a camera on him or anything like that. I think it was 2014, so cameras then were still quite good on phones, not like today where they've got even better again, but he didn't have a camera with him. It was just a mobile phone. So this time when he went up in his aircraft, he was probably about 5 pushing 10,000 feet, so he's going through the cloud base. Quite detailed, the footage, and he had the feeling that he was going to see something again, so he had this phone ready. And on this occasion he was flying and he saw the two objects coming from his left hand side out the window. So he kept flying in a straight line, obviously, and you can see the clouds as he's going through them. And these two objects, a large cylindrical shaped object, flew directly in front of his aircraft, shooting up. They were ascending as well as going directly across. And it was followed by a smaller disc-shaped craft. And he's watching these craft all the time, so he's still flying, obviously, and the craft fly from left to right in front, and then they do a big loop, a big arch flight, come back on themselves and go back in front of his aircraft again. But together this time, so they're actually in a smaller formation, and disappear. And he's getting all this on his mobile phone. And when you slow it down, you obviously in frames, but the footage is not the best, but it's the best from the time. You can see the actual objects. But civilian aircraft would not do that. Military aircraft wouldn't do that to another aircraft.
No.
And they certainly wouldn't do it twice, even if the first time was a mistake. So, and with him also saying he'd seen aircraft, UFOs before. So that's probably one of the best pieces of footage that I enjoyed doing, analysing.
Yeah, I know you said that's on YouTube, but have you got that on your own website as well?
Yes, yeah. the actual analysed footage that I did is on my UFO only YouTube channel.
Oh, that's brilliant. Now, the second case that I know you enjoyed analysing was one which I think we're all very much aware of, which was the 1942 battle over Los Angeles. What was it about that intrigued you so much?
Well, that's one most people were brought into with ufology. You know, it's been around as long as Philip.
Well, Philip went to school with Noah. Did you know that?
But I think America had only been in the war 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why this large object was coming over Los Angeles, and it was being fired at from every position going. They thought it was the enemy, maybe the German Luftwaffe or the Japanese coming to attack Los Angeles. And this object just steadily, glided over Los Angeles itself. It was seen by thousands of people. The amount of rounds that were shot at this thing, and it didn't waver one bit at all. It had searchlights on it. And everybody must have seen the actual photographs, from the time. So it was definitely one to analyse.
Yeah, this is the famous photograph, isn't it, with the light sitting something up in the sky, and you can see the rounds, the shells exploding nearby.
That's it.
Yeah, this is the one where not one single shell appeared to hit the actual object that was up there.
Oh.
So yeah, what you mentioned the eye detail that you got when you enhanced this image. What was in that detail?
Well, the actual shape of the object, it was obviously a craft of some sort, but the actual detail that came out when it was analysed, going through the process that I go through, and overlaying the different inverted and the filtered analysed images of this one large craft, and it brought out detail that you couldn't see, no one's ever seen before, because nobody's ever gone through this sort of process of doing it, because they just see the black and white photograph with the searchlight on the object, and you can see a vague outline of the object itself. But when I went into the process of analysing the image, you could see that it didn't look like it did on its outline.
That's quite interesting. So where can we see that? I know it's in the book, but is there anywhere else we can see that?
No, I think I only put it in the book.
Right, okay.
Really, I did it for the book because I was going through different cases. It was really cases through the decades. So, and that was.
I mean, it's one of the things Jason and I discussed when he was putting the book together. Is yes, try and use as many photographs or pieces of film that would be unfamiliar to people, but also, some that they would know, some that they would probably recognise or certainly have heard of, and that was a prime suspect, as Jason just outlined. You don't need to see it anywhere else. Just buy the book, UFO Photos, Jason Gleaves, on Amazon now. Rush and get it before it sells out.
Right, where did you say we can get that, Phil? I didn't quite get that. Just say that again.
I think it's on sale on Amazon.
Right, we'll have to have a look. So, Jason, I know Phil and yourself, you both mentioned this future publication that you're bringing out at some point next year. Do you want to give us a little bit of highlights about that, or do we have to wait and buy it?
Well, I can't, because I can't tell you anything, because Jason literally delivered the final manuscript today.
Yeah.
And I managed to download it and save it. And I was speaking to a colleague in Germany who runs his own publisher. It's a company called Neib Verlag. I probably haven't pronounced it correctly, but they're just about to publish Jason's first book, UFO Photos, in German in the early part of next year. And I just said, I've got some books that we're planning for next year, and Jason said literally just arrived. I'm talking minutes beforehand.
Yeah.
And he just says, I'll have them all, Philip. So both of Jason's books at some point will be published in German as well. So I'll let Jason tell you about the next one. This is sort of follow-up to UFO Photos, because I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah, this book, at the minute, it's as it is. It's called the Ufology Umbrella, and and that's the way I see ufology as a huge umbrella. Really, the word ufology, because it's as if you've got a huge umbrella above yourself, and everything cascades off that, in all the different categories of within ufology itself. So that's really when I broke into the different close encounters.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking 1 to 7. So I break down the close encounters into segments and then explain them to people, and then try to put cases in there. And through the help of Philip, he's helped me with cases as well. Really trying to pigeonhole them into what they are, CE1, CE2, right the way through. And it's surprising the amount of cases that you can actually bring up, But then I've also tried to go deeper into, how do people, how if ETs are actually visiting our planet, how would they get here, and how the methods of travel they would use, and hyperspace travel, interdimensional travel. I try to explain antimatter, matter, and try to go down that road of my interpretation, of course, but try to explain, really just to open it up to what people, it's not just, when people see craft, they're not just nuts and bolts craft. People in ufology nowadays are talking more towards interdimensional craft.
Mm-hmm.
People see discs and triangle-shaped craft, like we've explained before, but people are seeing orbs. People are seeing, illuminated craft in different shapes and forms, and where they morph together.
There's a question for you. I was asked this, and I didn't really have an answer for it. Is why do UFOs need lights on them?
Yeah. Well, aircraft have lights on them, as in civilian and military, so you can see them. That's the whole point of them having their strobe lights, and it's to make them visible. They're not there for the aircraft pilot to see where he's going. They're there for other people and everybody else to see the aircraft in the sky. So yeah, I wondered myself, that's one of the questions I have thought, why do UFOs as such, why do they have lights on them? Whether it's the propulsion systems on them, we don't know the type of propulsion, anti-gravity, etc. that they're using. Is it producing lights, different coloured lights underneath? It could be anything, couldn't it?
What do you reckon, Chris? Why do they have lights on UFOs?
Well, why shouldn't they?
That's
my answer.
That's a double negative.
I can be honestly say it's not something I've ever actually thought about, to be quite honest with you. If the nuts and bolts craft, and they are coming from, let's call it planet Zog for the sake of an argument, let's say they're coming from planet Zog and they're flying around the skies there, and they're a nuts and bolts craft, then they need some kind of identification system on them, even if they might not have a radar system which can bounce the reflections back to another radar system to show where that craft is. So that could be another reason that they could have lights on.
Well, there you go. That's it. We could debate that all night, I reckon.
Let's talk about that now for the next half hour. No, it is an interesting thought, though, isn't it, really? Why do they have lights on? That's it.
There you go.
Yeah. Maybe they want to be seen.
That's another answer, yeah. Why not? Absolutely. So, Jason, where do you see yourself where do you see your position in ufology then, in investigating things, and are you just for the sake of a word, a person who sits in front of a computer, analyses images, or do you get up, do you go out and do investigations, do you talk to people face to face, or is there something else that you have in mind?
I can see myself continuing doing what I do now, really, for the fact that I enjoy doing what I do. I'm also finding questions out daily. I'm also looking more for questions, because there's other things that have happened to me that I haven't sort of brought out yet, really. I'm supposed to be, at some point, getting in touch with Mary Rodwell to have some sort of, what's the word?
Counselling?
Yes, sort of thing. Yeah, where she goes, a hypnotist type of thing. Regression. Because there's things I'd like to know still.
No, that's quite interesting, because obviously you had a great chance earlier this year to come, in September, to come and meet Mary and take part in a conference,
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're aware, but out of that Sunday after the OLM conference this year, Mary did a workshop for people who have experienced extremely close encounter with our visitors, and out of that, there is a group which has been set up on Facebook called Concern, which is Contactees Close Encounter Resource Network, which is actually my group. So if you're interested in that, Jason, I can put you on that if you want to go on to that. And Mary's a member on there. Are you indeed? I didn't know that. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I've actually undergone hypnosis. Not for anything like this, because when I was with Bufora, they had a moratorium on regressive hypnosis. We didn't use it. And I sat in as an observer on a couple of sessions with two different people who got entirely different results than I thought they would. So a few years back, I had trouble sleeping. And I found a local hypnotherapist who was highly recommended, and I underwent hypnosis with this gentleman. And I was a bit sceptical, to be honest. I thought, that's hypnosis, it's rubbish. But it does work. And I'm not saying you can be regressed or anything like that. All I'm saying is, I'm sat in his armchair, which is an electronic one, and I'm wired up, and I've got headphones on, so and I can speak to him, and you've positioned the armchair yourself, so you're laid back and you're comfortable. And by the time he'd finished, I felt like I was floating. Couldn't feel the armchair underneath me at all. I knew it was there, but I couldn't feel it.
Yeah.
And what is interesting, this is not a plug, but I recently published a book by Calvin Parker about his experience in Pascagoula, and he talks about when he had the encounter. He believes he was lying, when he's taken on board this thing, he was lying on some kind of bed, but he couldn't feel it, and he couldn't see it either, because he was frozen solid. And it just kind of thought, well, I wonder if that's the same kind of thing we were talking about, because when I was laid on this couch, I could not feel it once I was under hypnosis. And it did help me sleep. So there you go. But it was also interesting, just from a research point of view. If somebody says, "Oh, have you ever been under hypnosis?" And I can say, "Yes, I have," and I know what it feels like. So I found it fascinating. And I wasn't running around like a chicken trying to lay a square egg or anything like that, I can assure you. But yeah, sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. Sorry.
No, I really want to do it. More the fact, there was one instance with, like I said, I've not actually said. I've said to people close to me and things like that, but I was involved in Desert Storm with the RAF in Iraq. When I came back, long story short, I had a bad time of it. And in my house at the time, I saw a small grey in my house. So there's a lot more coming out and things like that. So, they're the sort of things I need answers to myself, really. And it goes back again to digging and looking, for the answers, the Richard Dreyfuss syndrome, as I said before. So yeah.
I tell you, regarding the Richard Dreyfuss syndrome, when you was looking for your answers and so on, I bet your mum's glad you didn't start building mud mounds in the middle of your front hallway.
What do you think he was doing tonight when he was late?
Yeah. Got no mashed potato left at home.
Oh dear me, I don't know. Now I do know you've actually looked at the football shaped UFO from Russia. Was it the Voronezh incident, the Soviet Union city of Voronezh there? What was your outcome with that? What was your findings with that, Jason?
That came again from Philip. And
he's got to get his hand in, hasn't he? Yeah, he's always there.
Well, what happened, Chris? I mean, when Voronezh happened in the late 80s, it was actually released by the Soviet news agency TASS.
Yeah.
And they said that this UFO had landed, and these very tall creatures have been seen in association with it, and it witnessed by school children and all kinds of people, and it left traces on the ground. And although that incident wasn't photographed, there was a photograph taken over the town of Voronezh in daylight. And quite rapidly there was a UFO group set up. I can't remember the names of the gentlemen because there's about a dozen of them. And somehow I was interviewed by a Russian newspaper called Izvestia.
Yeah.
And all I could tell them was what I'd read anywhere else. Anyway, they published it, and they put Philip Mantle UFOs, and I used to live in Batley in West Yorkshire, England, and they got letters, and it literally said Philip Mantle UFOs, Batley, England, and they came from Russia, and these guys got in touch with us, and at some point they sent me this black and white photograph, strange looking object over the town, and it had been sat in my files for years, And when I met Jason, I asked him if he could have a look at it, and he did. And you can ask him what he made of it.
Yeah, well, you sent it to me, but you didn't give me any information, if I recall, at the time. So I went through and I went through the same process as I always do. There was slight bits of information, but not the overall picture. And long story short, I came up with roughly the same analysis results as it was done back in the 80s by people at the time who actually conducted their own research.
Yeah, we had it analysed by Ground Saucer Watch.
Yeah.
And that was a chap called William Spalding, and they were sort of pioneers in using computers for analysing photographs. Now, at that point, Ground Saucer Watch had closed; they're no longer involved. But I'd still in contact with them, so I sent him the photograph, and they analysed it, and it came out as unidentified. And I thought, I'll do it. It was kind of a blind test for Jason. I didn't, I wanted to know that we had it tested in the 80s using the technology of the time. So here we are, 20 plus years later with Jason and the latest computer software. I just thought, if he analysed it, I wonder what the results would be. Would be the same or different? They're pretty much the same, weren't they, Jason?
Yeah, they were. And well, it was when you actually go into the actual object itself, you could tell it was spherical in shape, obviously, but with obviously the markings that wrapped around its entirety and things like that, things really stood out. And then when I actually gave my findings back to you, you did actually send me all the other information,
yes,
and it was quite amazing to read over. And I thought, well, yeah, that's sort of what I came up with. That I went a different way about it, but I came to the same conclusion. And so yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting.
Have you looked at the the McMinnville photographs from the 50s taken by Paul Trent. Have you cast your eye over them at all, Jason?
Yeah, we did those in the book, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes.
Yeah, I went in because really it was another case that was so looked into by virtually everybody that's been down that road of looking in. So I wanted to get my own grasp of it. And when I analysed the photograph and enhanced that one and brought it, because it looks like a disc-shaped side-on when you look at it, it is its silhouette in the sky. But the detail that came out on the shape of it looked like two sets of wings. So that sort of goes back to when I did the sighting analysis of the Brazilian airline pilot in Wiltshire. Do you remember that one I did?
Yes, I do, yes.
Yeah. And that one, when you look at the original photographs there, they look like two disc-shaped objects that were, in the sky, same altitude, etc. But when I went into those, they were obviously military aircraft. This one, I went into other cases from the same time, era, and came up with another sighting of a jet type, like, of image object that was seen. And when I actually overlaid them, the wings were in the same position, which again were little alarm bells to sort of say, well, is it really a disc-shaped object, or is it an object that looks disc in shape but it's flying away from you, so it gives the impression. And then there were two, they look like heat exhausts on the rear, so again that comes back to military aircraft.
The reason I asked, because the interest in this photograph has resurfaced, or photographs, there were two taken. And of course, the skeptics claim that what we're actually looking at is a hoax, and that the object, the UFO, is the wing mirror off of Paul Trent's truck.
Yeah.
And because there is a photograph, I believe, of Paul Trent stood somewhere next to his truck or something like that. Yeah. And they claim it's the wing mirror, and it's because there's an electrical cable goes across in part of it, and it's just hanging from there. What do you make of that?
I did analyse the wing mirror of a truck from the same time period. You can see all this in the book. They're all there, the images for you to see, and tried to overlay again. It did look similar. The actual photographs, I think there were two photographs of the actual disc taken from distance, and people had said that they were hanging from telegraph wires that were going across. You can see in the photograph.
Yeah.
We managed to sort of eliminate that. I overlaid the two separate photographs again, and you can see the object. The reason I do that with a lot of photographs, overlay similar photographs taken of the same object, is you can prove that the object is moved. Now, whether that's further away, closer, altitude, etc. But it also, you can use the surrounding objects to help with the location identification of the object itself, because you can use trees, buildings, roads.
Yeah, you can build up a bit of perspective with it, can't you?
Yeah, and it's good because you can prove that object has moved anyway, so that sort of cancels that one out. And I did the same with the Trent photographs. So again, I really do like the old photographs because it's pre-digital, so it's harder to fake. I know people use panes of glass to put images on and take photographs, and that's really difficult to prove. But I found it fascinating, the Trent case.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that about glass. We had a series of 4 photographs from Barnsley in the late 80s, And you see the disc shape flying across the rooftops opposite, and he's taking it through his bedroom window. You can see that. And it appeared in the Barnsley Chronicle. And, I managed to get in touch with the chap and interview him. And his story changed a little bit. And I got the original negatives, the original prints. And when you laid the prints, on your desk in front of you, it didn't go from left to right continuously. When you compare it to the negatives, it sort of went forward, then sort of nipped backwards again. There's something not right here. Cutting a long story short, we had the photographs again analysed by Graham Saucer Watch, and it was actually stuck on his bedroom window. It was a piece of transparent material where the UFO was drawn on it, and then stuck on his bedroom window. Then he took the photographs, and with the aid of the computer, you could see the edges of the plastic or whatever he'd used stuck on the window. You couldn't see that no matter how much you enlarged it. I've got some big 8x10s, enlargements from the original negatives. And you can't see anything, but the computer did. This will make you laugh. The photographs appeared in the Daily Star. He sold them to the Star for a nice fee. And then I went back to the Daily Star and said, I'm sorry, they're fake. And they even run a little cartoon of us faking. And it was a gentleman called Peter. I won't mention his surname. And he left a message on my answering machine. I can't repeat it to this day. I think he was going to cut my arms and legs off or something like that. But it was amazing, what the computer could do. But as you were saying, the ways of faking photographs pre-digital days were much less sophisticated and not necessarily as easy to do as today.
No.
And most of the photographs we got that came through our across my desk were of, aircraft, birds, and so on. Very few hoaxes like that I was aware of. There's a couple that we've mentioned, but most were just, everyday things, perhaps taken at, like a contrail with the sun behind it and things like that.
Yeah.
And of course, birds, still the birds were a culprit. But it was an interesting story, was the Barnsley photographs. They had a very well-known UFO researcher stroke author in the UK. I'm not going to mention his name, but I have a letter on file where he completely believed it, did no research, just looked at the photographs, yeah, they're genuine, and that's it, But I'm afraid it's we got, and like you say, Jason, it's nice. Still get that buzz.
Yeah, the buzz.
You get to the bottom of it one way or another.
Conclusion, yeah.
Yeah, you get and sometimes you get a rational explanation or a fake, but then every now and again you get a little gem. I've seen that footage you mentioned from the Argentine pilot, and it is very intriguing. I'd never heard of it until your book, and I would advise people to go on your YouTube channel and take a look at it. It is fascinating. It really is.
But there is a case that I actually was going to put in the book, and again, it's an old photograph from. I think it was a father and son. I can't remember the name of it, but it was during about 1965-ish. And its nickname was the Vintage Christmas Tree Light Decoration UFO. And I was actually putting it in the book as an original photograph, which I sort of not half believed, but thought it warranted to go in the book. When I went through the process of analysing the photographs to bring them up to put in the book, that's when the anomalies started to appear, because it's pre-digital. I've got actual cut lines around. You could see cut lines that were enhanced through the, I think it was the inverted first that brought them up. So I thought, oh, hello. Look more deep into it. the time period, and it's a multicoloured light, so it's got, I think it's a red, a green, and maybe a blue or something light. And it looks like a UFO on its side, and all black sky, or that's what was said, it was a black sky. Again, Sherlock Holmes got back into it in depth, analysed, and it found out that it was actually a Christmas tree decoration on the top of a Christmas tree. Because when I looked into the story, it was taken on one frame on a roll of film. And if you actually read the story and go deeper into it, the next photographs were of a Christmas tree that were taken at home. Anyway, so I thought, well, what did they look like? So I got the photograph of the Christmas tree. Directly sat on top where the fairy should be with this Christmas tree light decoration light. And so I did the usual, overlaid, put them over, and it was identical in shape, size, colours of the lights, and even did a thing. So it turned into a story of being a UFO to being a solved UFO case. So I thought it wasn't always the unsolved cases that went in there. It was definitely the solved cases.
Well, exactly. I mean, I remember discussing the book with you. We wanted to highlight that, you know, your techniques can, not 100%, but they can pick out, you know, the fakes, the misidentifications, the birds, the satellites, whatever, and show examples of that. But I think I remember that photograph. I'm sure I've seen it.
Yeah. Well, it comes out within when you get an old UFO book, it's one of the cases that are actually there for you to read, and that's what comes out in the case. It was a father and son. They both saw it. But if you actually go into detail and more depth into the case and the background, like we were saying earlier, and they said, oh, the roll of film was developed, but it was all of Christmas tree decorations and everything like that. But there was one in there of this UFO that they took. Well, that's what it was. It was just a bad exposure. But it wasn't even the bad exposure. They've actually cut the old style method of putting an old image onto another image.
Yeah, it's amazing. So are there any images now that you're currently working on that you think would interest, you know, someone out there?
Yeah, in the new book especially. If you go on my Facebook page, UFO Only, I'm constantly putting out there more and more photographs on a daily basis. But in the new book, there's a great case that came via yourself, was the Tony Dodd case that he saw. And I've gone into real depth in that and done the photographs again. And the great thing about that case, with Tony Dodd being an ex-policeman, he went into so much depth and detail of the case and the sighting and the location. It made it a lot easier to analyse and get a better picture of what actually went on.
I mean, for those who are not aware, I mean, sadly, Tony's no longer with us. Tony lived in Grassington in North Yorkshire, in the Yorkshire Dales. He'd been in the RAF previously, but had spent many years as a police officer, was a police sergeant. And he'd had his own sighting out on the moors, just outside of Skipton. And Tony wanted to get to the bottom of this. And I was part of the Yorkshire UFO Society at the time. And we had a lot of sightings in and around Skipton, you know. So the epicenter was Carlton Moor, which is just outside above the village of Carlton. Now, Tony had taken one photograph on the moor one night of two lights, and he was very disappointed with his result. So he went off and spent a lot of money buying a really good 35mm camera some high-speed film that he kept with him at all times. And on this particular evening, I can't remember the date, he was driving from Grassington to a meeting. He was actually going to meet Graham Birdsall at the Devonshire Arms, which is on your way out to Bolton Abbey. And on the way, he had his wife Christine with him. They saw this thing, and it was near a place called Beamsley Beacon. It's a local landmark. And he stopped the car, and he gave his wife, Pauline, the binoculars. And she's looking at this thing, and she said it was, it was like a top-shaped object, all covered in a multitude of red lights that all glowed in at one time. So Tony grabs the camera, takes 2 photographs, then the third one, he really sort of jams his elbows on the top of the car or whatever, keep the camera still, and clicked it. And then this thing, whatever it was, disappeared down behind the hill of Beamsley Beacon. He told Graham about this when he carried on to his meeting with him. So we had the photographs developed. The first 2 there was a lot of camera shake on them, but the third one was pretty good. He held it very, very still. And we had, enlargements and so on. But we sent it off to William Spalding at Ground Saucer Watch, and we had to pay him a small fee. It wasn't a lot, I don't know, £20 or £30 at the time. And they analysed it for us, and they sent back the computer analysis, etc. And they said it was the first photograph that they'd ever received at that point from Britain that had remained unidentified in their database. And it's a fascinating incident. I mean, it really is. I know the area. I've been past it many times. Tony's undoubtedly, witnessed this phenomenon on several occasions, up close and personal as well. And these, the photograph you're talking about is testament to Tony, really. I mean, we tried many times, Jason. We literally camped out on that moor for a whole week in a caravan.
Right.
And all we saw were the clouds, rain clouds. But with a lot of fun, when a lot of people come and report things to us. But what it did enable us to discover is that whatever the phenomenon was in and around there, it wasn't something that was only happening recently. It went back decades, many decades. And I mean, like I say, I've just received your manuscript today, so I didn't have the time to look through it.
No.
I will certainly have a look at that. But
I wish Tony had seen the results I came up with, because you'll see for yourself in the book. The object is, I put it in the different spectrums right the way through, and you can see. And I've actually overlaid his photograph with another photograph of the identical position in the daytime that he took, that you sent me.
Yeah.
And everything matches. Everything. It's just one of the most perfect UFO cases, if you want to say that. And even down to the original hand drawing his wife did.
Yes.
Because she actually, while Tony was photographing this, she was actually watching it and looking at it through binoculars.
Correct.
At the time. So she did a detailed drawing, and I've actually overlaid the drawing she did onto the actual object. I've actually turned because it's on its side. It looked like a spinning top, as she described, like a toy, a children's toy spinning top, which it does. I've actually put it right up so it's horizontal, and then overlaid her drawing onto the real photograph, and it's virtually identical.
That's amazing, because what Ground Saucer Watch said about it was this thing was self-illuminating.
Yeah.
And it was giving off a gas or a vapor. You can see that on the side of it, or something like that. So and not only that, Jason, it did correspond with a lot of the other sightings we had in and around the area from other people. And we tried our damnedest, to I mean, I wasn't a bad photographer. I got, a whole range of camera gear. I never even got a chance to photograph anything up there.
Yeah.
But, it is a fascinating case. And we haven't got a publication date yet for your book next year.
No.
But, we'll let people know via Outer Limits magazine when it's going to be made available.
Oh, yes.
In fact, I'll dig it out tomorrow. Now you've told me about that, because I didn't know what was in it. But
Yeah.
I'll certainly have a look at that. Did we publish that in Outer Limits magazine, Chris? They took the Tony Dodd photographs.
Yes, we did. It was a number of issues back now. I can't remember the exact issue, but we looked at it, we re-examined it. But I mean, obviously that was using the original documentations and footage, etc. Now, if you've done a re-evaluation of that, we can actually link that in with the release of Jason's book, and we'll get it all put in at the same time. I'm more than happy to do that for you.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
That was one of the things, wasn't it, that Tony was very, very proud of, the fact that it was one of Britain's unexplained UFO cases.
Well,
really,
as far as ground saucer was concerned,
yeah,
it was the only one that they'd ever analysed from the UK that they, at that time, registered as unidentified. So everything else they dealt with from the UK had a conventional explanation as far as they were concerned. These weren't skeptics. They were quite open-minded. They weren't afraid to tell you that this is a balloon or whatever, But on the other hand, they weren't afraid to say, no, it's unidentified either.
Yeah,
they were quite open-minded. And although they closed at that point, they weren't officially involved in it. It's because we knew them. And I think I corresponded with them on and off for the years, that they still had all the computer equipment, and we still paid them a small fee. And they did it for us, and they did 2 or 3 things for us. But we already knew that we could count on Tony's testimony. There was no denying that. But it's always nice to have independent verification of what you've been saying.
It was a great case to work on, because of the information there for you to cross-reference and to make. I've done detailed maps of the position he was standing in, to where the position of the sighting, the overlaying of the photographs to correspond, and I really identify the position as 100%, the actual hill in the distance, and even trees, etc. It was a joy to work on.
Yeah, because there's trees in the foreground, and you've got whatever it is, and then there's Beamsley Beacon in the background. So you've got it's all there. As far as computer analysis is concerned, Jason, you've got everything you want there, haven't you?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, as we've got around about 9 minutes left of tonight's programme, do you want to tell us what you're currently working on, Jason?
Yeah, well, I've just finished the new book, the ufology umbrella. Whether I change anymore, if I keep hold of it too long, I keep changing things. But
I was actually talking to Paul Sinclair about this. He gets the problem. He writes his chapter, then he goes back and he sits down and reads through it, and you think, well, no, that doesn't sound right. I'll just put this word in. I'll alter that word. Before you've done it, you've rewrote the full chapter again.
Well, I remember. I designed his cover for Truth Proof 2 for him. We had a lot of emails backwards and forwards.
So, if you want to carry on, then what you're currently working on?
Constantly on my UF only page and videos. If something catches my eye, then it's got my attention, and I'm working on it. People contacting me as well. I think I've just done something that's going to be on Netflix soon, part of a documentary through the SETI Ranch.
Right.
I did a talk there last year via Skype, a recorded 90-minute talk, I think it was. So yeah, and I'm always getting stuff to analyse from this. So they're doing an actual documentary, and they've asked me to do a 5 or 10 minute segment in it. Through Peter Slattery in Australia, ESETI Australia, I do a lot of analysing work for him. I'll be also doing part of his documentary with him as well.
Excellent.
So there's always something on the go. Always something.
Well, that's the case, isn't it, with these subjects that we call UFOs? You know, there is always something new, or there's always something, you know, to re-go over something from the past, as you've done plenty of times with the images. So, what is the next process in the book then, Philip? Getting this sorted and getting it out to the public.
Well, like I say, it's just arrived today, so I'll have a quick look through it. If I think anything needs editing or changing or moving around, I'll just tell Jason, and he can do it himself. But like I said, instantly, our German colleagues have taken the book as well. So they're going to publish Jason's first book, UFO Photos, in the new year. So, well, you know, when the other one will get translated, I've no idea, but hopefully next year. We've done such a good deal with them that they are now employing 3 translators instead of 1.
Oh, right.
So, and he just said, I'll have the lot. I told him what we were planning for next year. For example, we've got Jason's book. I have another book from a gentleman in Japan dealing with some ancient UFO sightings. We have one from Tiago in Brazil, which is like the best cases in Brazil. That's coming up next year. And a few more. Just today, I've published a book, another little book about Pascagoula. It's from a Greek gentleman called Stephanos. So there's.
Go and pronounce his surname.
Pangiotakis.
Oh, well done.
It's close. It's close as that. But so that as well, and you know. So these will be all out next year, but I'll have a look at Jason's book. I'm keen to look at it now. He's told me what's gone in it. He'd sent me one before this, which was sort of part done.
Yeah, it wasn't complete, was it?
Yeah, so I've literally downloaded it tonight before speaking to Jason, and so I'm keen to have a look at that, and we'll decide between us what I don't want to do in 2019 is to publish as many books as I did this year, because I want to be able to dedicate more time to each book as it comes out. I just don't want them rolling off the production line. Next. Want to try and concentrate and give some time to promote them. I make people aware of what's available, because as part of my ethos of Flying Disc Press was to try and make things available that perhaps hadn't been there before, or was hard to find, or had been published in another language previously. And so I'm still doing that. And, Jason just sent me the book and just said, I'm publishing that. So, there you go. It'll be out sometime next year, but we're not sure when yet.
Okay, well, I'm sure that's something. Well, I'll be looking forward to it for one thing. And as I said earlier, if Outer Limits magazine can help in any way, shape, or form to publicise this, then please do indeed. So, what I'm going to do, gentlemen, I'm going to close the interview there. And I'd just like to say, on behalf of Inside Outer Limits, myself and Philip Mantle, I'm sure Philip will agree with me, thank you very much, Jason Gleaves, and we wish you very well for your future.
Yes, thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much, guys.